Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today I will be discussing my 2020 presidential election prediction for May 2020. Now, as you can see, I've already filled in the safe states, leaving the Republicans with 21 electoral votes, ignoring Maine's 1st district, which is actually a tilt district, and Nebraska's 2nd district, which always falls into the likely category, because of its coverage of the Omaha-Lincoln area. And the Democrats with 232 electoral votes, or exactly what Hillary Clinton had in 2016. My logic here, because this gets questioned every time, is it is historically unprecedented for a president to win states they lost in their first run. Now, there have been cases where people have done it, but those have fallen under very rare circumstances and have usually been involved in rally around the flag effects, like George Bush with 9/11. So, in reality, we're starting off with the Democrats at what seems to be a very key advantage. However, the factor here is all of these blue states are the Democrats' best shot. This is the remains of Barack Obama's blue wall. So, while the Democrats only need to win 48 electoral votes, or basically 3 states, the Republicans have the advantage in all of the rest to an extent. So we'll throw some likely states on the pile, and then we'll work from there. So we'll give the Democrats a free one to start with, and that would be the state of Michigan. Now, Michigan famously flipped in 2016. Totally unexpected. Wisconsin, when it happened, people went, well, I can see why it occurred, but it's still surprising. Michigan seemed to come out of nowhere. Barack Obama had done very well in Michigan. It looked like Hillary Clinton was going to do well in Michigan, and the state had historically voted blue. However, after the ramifications of the 2014 midterm elections, the state was mostly red, and I think people just didn't take that into proper account. They assumed that at the statewide level, it would just go on voting blue forever. And what we've seen is a Michigan that is blue, but not as deep a sapphire as one would expect. More of a eggshell blue? Easter blue? I can't remember what that's called. A chalky blue. So nowhere near purple, but not as deep blue as anyone would expect. And I think there's a very solid chance, especially given the fact Donald Trump barely won the state by 0.2% in 2016, and the sudden resurgence of the Democratic Party at the statewide level, and technically speaking the local level, but gerrymandering's at fault for their lack of victories there. I'd say Michigan is a very likely state for a candidate like Joe Biden to pick up. Especially now that the Democrats seem to have learned that, oops, you need to let the Midwest know, or the Great Lakes, know you actually want them to vote for you. Weird. Now we'll give one to the Republicans. Ohio. Ohio is a fascinating state for one main reason. It theoretically should be one of the most democratic states. It's got major metropolitan areas, all based around industries that have abandoned them, so they should be looking for new ones. It is the Rust Belt state. It has and is surrounded by all of the other major blue states, with railroads and roads running through them, down from the Erie area over to Illinois, but it seems to have fallen through the cracks, with its only reliable Democratic vote going to its Senator Sherrod Brown, as it did in 2018, while Republicans swept everything else in the state. And while gerrymandering is to blame for the extent that the Republicans won, the Democrats can't blame it on everything. They did lose the governor and, I believe, lieutenant governor's races quite handily. So, a candidate like Joe Biden, which does have that sort of folksy, blue-collar vibe, could do better in Ohio, but not well enough that I'm willing to move it out of the likely category. And I have two more states I want to put under the likely sign. Or 3. Sorry, it's a tad late. First up is Kansas. Kansas is a state which I have found interesting, because they have gone from being a, tried and true, dyed-in-the-wool red state to, through seemingly the actions of Chris Kobach and Chris Kobach alone, being more welcoming of blue politicians. They have especially seen very high popularity of their governor, which has transpired into very low popularity with Donald Trump. So there's a very solid chance they could end up flipping under if the Democrats were to pile money on Kansas. However, I don't think the Democrats will be fighting for their 6 electoral votes anytime soon, when they have a greater advantage up here on the Rust Belt area and down here in the Southwest. So the other state that's likely Republican is also Iowa. Iowa's a state, much like Wisconsin, which has been getting more and more red, at least over the past decade. And I don't see a reason for that changing. Iowa went for Donald Trump handily, and I could see them doing it again. Joe Biden could be the type of guy to flip Iowa, but honestly, I don't see that happening unless significant attention is spent there. However, there's enough of a chance the state will pull towards Joe Biden on its own. I'm willing to mark it as likely. And the last likely state is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, for one main reason, it is Joe Biden's pseudo-home state. He likes to remark how he's from Scranton, which is a part of the state that Democrats have historically been losing. The middle, more rural parts of Pennsylvania, they usually win the far east, which is Philadelphia, and the far west, which is Pittsburgh, but then they miss the bits in the middle, which is what caused them to lose overall. They did incredibly well in the last Senate race, and frankly, the Republican they put up wasn't a slouch. He wasn't amazing, but he wasn't like a businessman or here's a conservative activist. It was an actual candidate. So the fact that Democrats won that seat handily shows that Pennsylvania may very well be willing to remain blue at the statewide level for at least another couple of elections. So I'm willing to put as likely Joe Biden can flip Pennsylvania. Meaning the Democrats only need to win one more state in order to be able to flip the presidency. Now we get into the leans category. In this case, I've got one state which falls under leans that everyone's going to be talking about, and that is Texas. In my opinion, Joe Biden, well, not just my opinion, the polls show it too. Joe Biden polled the best in Texas out of any of the Democrats. He is the type of guy who can win the Obama coalition, which in many ways still exists in Texas, and could flip. That is a mixture of suburban voters, Hispanics, and African Americans. Now, Joe Biden doesn't do amazingly with African Americans, as in getting extra turnout, but he does get enough. And if he were to send someone down like Julian Castro to say, go on a Joe Biden press tour, that could really help him in Texas and move the state more towards the Democrats. Or someone like Donald Trump could drop Mike Pence and pick up someone like current Governor Perry as his vice president, and that would seal up Texas, instead of trying to protect the state of Indiana. Albeit, it's basically an open secret now. Mike Pence was chosen to be VP on account of the fact that the expectation was he and Trump would lose, and it allows Mike Pence to bow out while still maintaining a semblance of a political career. So it wouldn't be unprecedented for him to say, okay, Pence, I don't need you, I'm taking on Perry instead. I think it's still Perry. No, Abbott's the governor now, so taking on Governor Abbott. Though picking up Perry, who I believe is in the Department of Energy, would also be good for him. Another likely state is the state of Georgia. Now, I keep going back between Georgia being likely and leans, and for now it's leans, and this is due to the fact that I've seen an entire blue shift in the polling at the Senate level and at the state level in Georgia. We haven't gotten a proper presidential polling out of there since, I believe, March, so I want to see if the trend is reflected there too. But Georgia is a state that is on the cusp of turning purple. It isn't purple yet. It's like Texas. We all know where it's going. It's just a question of when is it going to arrive. In 2008, everyone thought it was going to be in 2016. In 2016, everyone thought it was going to be, could have been 2016 if people had been a bit better with their play, and now it's a question of, the perpetual thing is the next election plus one. So that's where Texas is, and I think Georgia is there too. It's a state that's getting steadily more blue. In many ways, it's like Democrats are trading Wisconsin for Georgia or Iowa for Texas. In exchange for letting those states become more red, they're winning more states down here in the Deep South. Classical conservative territory. The Democrats do not have any likely or leans seats. That's just how this map is. They are probably going to hold on to Hillary Clinton's coalition, and they've got a solid chance of winning these two Rust Belt states. But I don't see Wisconsin or Arizona and North Carolina or Florida right now being anywhere close to being leans for people. And we'll go through each of them and I'll explain why. Starting with the big guy, Florida. Florida is leans Republican, or tilt Republican, for one main reason. Donald Trump polls really well in Florida, and Joe Biden just polls okay. However, there are a lot of polls where Joe Biden is inching out ahead of Trump, and we're talking like 44 to 43 type inching out ahead. But that's enough to bring Florida into question, and the southern part of the state is getting more blue, while the northern part is getting more red. So the real question for Florida is, and not to mention Florida's Republican voters are in the older demographic, so if COVID kills enough of them, there's a solid chance that could flip Florida too. It's not like Donald Trump won Florida by an astounding margin. He won by a decent amount, which is like Barack Obama winning Florida by a decent amount. It's a big enough state. Once you've convinced a demographic of voters to flip towards you, you're going to end up winning bigger. Your win will end up looking bigger, despite the fact that the state's actually quite close. The one counterexample being Al Gore and George Bush in 2020. In 2000, dear Lord, it's hard to say. I'm so used to doing the 20 follow-up number, I'm out of practice for saying 2000. So I think Donald Trump, at least 55% of the time, is winning Florida. The remaining three states, such as North Carolina, I think actually has a tilt chance of going to Joe Biden. North Carolina as a state has been going more and more Democratic. We've seen it in the governor's race, and now it's likely in this upcoming election we'll see it in the Senate race. I've actually marked the Senate race as leans Democratic instead of tilt. And if you want, watch my Senate video and you can hear my logic there. But why is it different at the presidential level? I mean, a state like Kansas or Texas makes sense for the discrepancy, but North Carolina? Well, there's a really simple reason. And that's because there is this weird logic, especially in purple states or states going purple, where you go, aha, for the Congress I'll put the party I want, and then I'll vote the opposite on the presidential ticket, or vice versa. So, I think that's how you end up with states like Pennsylvania looking more red than they may actually be, because they'll put blue for the presidency and then red on the down ballot. So you end up with a lot of state-level offices being Republican, but the presidency is Democratic. North Carolina, in this case, could very well suffer from that same phenomenon. However, I think Joe Biden's doing well enough in the polls as compared to Donald Trump, plus other factors to be considered. North Carolina is moving more towards the Democrats, put in the tilt category. Which, as you can see, means the Democrats in my scenario are at least 51% of the time gonna win the presidency. Over in Arizona, it's a similar story. A red state going purple. However, same phenomena. But I think by the time we get to Election Day, I'll be putting Arizona in the leans category as opposed to the tilt for the Democrats, because the Senate candidate is just blowing his opponent out of the water, and that could result in him having some unexpected coattails in the presidential election. Or it could result in the opposite phenomena, which is why this is still tilt, where, okay, I'm voting blue for the Senate, I better vote red for the president. And lastly, we have Wisconsin, which for now, it's on knife's edge, but it's tilt Democratic. This is just because 2018, they ended up voting for the Democrat over Scott Walker, who, for all intents and purposes, had a solid shot of winning. And I think that's a good example of testing I'll use the term popular, rather loosely, Republican incumbent versus an insurgent but known Democratic opponent. So I think Wisconsin, based on that model of the midterm election governor's race, but also factoring in the fact the state is turning more red, leaves me with Wisconsin being tilt. And there you have it. Democrats have 304 electoral votes and Republicans have 234 electoral votes, giving the Democrats the presidency. However, I will also make one little fun note. It is, I believe, 1 to 4 electoral votes away from Donald Trump's margin of victory in 2016. So, there's a solid chance that Donald Trump could be the first president to go in on the same number he goes out on, except it's reversed. So, with that fun fact, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below, and while you're down there, feel free to leave a comment, question, concern, or other political opinion, or be a spam. I welcome spam bots too. They help me in the algorithm. But otherwise, if you want to see more content from this channel, please click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be alerted when new content comes out from the channel. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful day.